back again, this time to talk about BookTrek 2023, which I am super excited about. I am a huge Star Trek fan. My favorite Star Trek series is Star Trek The Next Generation. It's the one that I grew up with. It first aired when I was 13 years old, and I've been a huge fan of it and been watching it continuously ever since. My father was a huge fan of the original series, of course, and I did watch reruns of those when, earlier, but it never really captured me the way that TNG did. So TNG helped to shape my view of the world, actually. And Vin over at Revenant Reads, I'll have his channel linked down in my description, is the creator of this event. He started it 2 years ago. The first year it was 5 months long, and the participants were reading Star Trek books from each of the first 5 Star Trek series. And then the next year, he cut it down to 2 months. The first month was for the first 5 Star Trek series, and the second one was for books that take place in all the other Star Treks. This year, he was initially going to cut it down to 1 month. But this is the year that Vin asked me to co-host. So I was really disappointed that my first year co-hosting BookTrek was only going to be a month long. However, Steve Donahue came to the rescue and complained about the fact that it was only a month long. I was very quick to add my objections to it only being a month long, and other co-hosts also chimed in, and we ended up with a 3-month event, June, July, August, and we're calling it the Summer of Trek. Let's see. The other co-hosts are Steve Donahue, Michael K. Vaughn, Gareth over at Songs, Books, and Other Magic, and Fred over at Read by Fred. And I will, of course, have all their channels linked down in my description as well. So let me show you what I'm going to read this year, for sure, and what I'm potentially going to read. I spent half a day going through all of my Star Trek books and pulling out the ones that I really felt strongly drawn to read. So the first one I know for sure that I'm going to read is going to be Star Trek The Motion Picture. It's the novelization of the first Star Trek movie. It was written by Gene Roddenberry himself. And so I'm really, really anxious to read this. I'm probably one of the few people who think that original Star Trek movie was absolutely fabulous. I really, really like it. It was kind of drawn out, I admit, but the story itself was wonderful, and I just really, really loved it. Let's see. Then I find myself really attracted to the first Star Trek novels that were written. So this year, I'm planning to read Planet of Judgment by Joe Haldeman. So my edition of that. And The Price of the Phoenix by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Colbreth. I just really like these black covers a lot. The Starless World by Gordon Eklund. I think I read this last year, actually. I'll have to check, but I think I actually did already read this. So this one. So these ones are not 100% for sure, but they are very, very strong possibilities for me. And that is Spock Must Die by James Blish, because I do believe this is one and only novel that he wrote himself in the Star Trek world, outside of the novelizations of the episodes. And I saw Ven talk about this. I think I saw Steve Donahue talk about this. I'm not really sure. But I have to read this. That's just all there is to it. And then Spock Messiah by Theodore R. Cogswell and Charles A. Spano Jr. I hear it's terrible as well. I'm dying to read it. And then I'm also really attracted to these Star Trek novels in the Timescape series. I don't know why, I just am. I'm really interested in reading Triangle by Sandra Marshak and Myrna Colbreth. I saw Vin talk about this last year. No, it wasn't last year. Maybe it was the year before last. And he thought it was awful and that Spock and Kirk were not in character. I have to read this. I mean, it sounds so awful that I'm going to love it. So, and then another Timescape novel, The Klingon Gambit by Robert E. Vardaman. Sounds awesome. Plus, it's a timescape, so that makes me extra attracted to it. The Covenant of the Crown by Howard Weinstein. Another timescape novel. So those are strong possibilities. Other really strong possibilities are the logs. I have 1 through 9. I thought there were only 9. And then I'm pretty sure that in Michael K. Vaughan's video, he says there was a 10th one. So now I'm really upset that I don't have log 10. So now I'm going to have to go on a whole hunt for log 10. But anyways, I found all these over the last year in one set. Somebody was selling them on eBay. I put them on my watch list. He gave me an offer for them. I gave him a counter offer for them. And I paid $10 for all of these logs, plus 3 of those Timescape books that I just showed you. I got all those Star Trek books for that cheap. I was thrilled. And these are all in really good shape. I won't show them to you individually. Whenever I read them, I'll show them to you then. Then let's see. Okay, this is a for sure read. 100% for sure going to read the first book in the Strange New World series, The High Country by John Jackson Miller. I'm really excited to read this because I am crazy about Strange New Worlds. It is so good. It's the first Star Trek since Enterprise, and I say I'm including Enterprise loosely actually because I was really mad about season 3 of Enterprise, but I will not digress. So it's the first Star Trek since Enterprise that has felt like a real Star Trek show to me. And I do like Picard. I like Picard. I hate Discovery, but I do like Picard, but it doesn't feel like a real Star Trek show to me. It feels like a Star Trek saga. So anyways, yeah, The High Country. Really excited about this one. Oh gosh, let's see. Okay, another really for sure read is a Star Trek The Next Generation book called Reunion by Michael Jan Friedman. I'm going to read this because last year I read Death in Winter by Michael Jan Friedman. I do have I talked about this in a video last year. I'll link that down in the description in case you want to see it. But there were a lot of references to other characters in this book that were in this novel. So I thought, well, because there's references here, I would go back and read this one that he wrote. So I just found a used copy of this really cheap and picked it up. For sure going to read this. Okay, so let me just go ahead and show you my other potentials for The Next Generation. So I do have about 35 of the numbered Star Trek The Generation novels. I've read a handful of those. I'm reading them in order. So I will most likely pick up at least a few of those and read them, but I didn't feel compelled to show them in the video because they're just part of the numbered series and they're buried over there on my shelf and I didn't want to dig them out. And then on top of those, I have books 47, 48, and 49, which is a trilogy that I picked up specifically because it was a trilogy called the Q Continuum rather. The first one is Q Space. The second one is Q Zone. And the third one is Q Strike. So I'm highly likely to read these. And then another one, I know a lot of you guys, Star Trek fans, don't like the Dark Mirror universe. I do like the Dark Mirror universe. I know. I can't help it. I know it's super cheesy, but I really like it. So I picked up the Next Generation novel called Dark Mirror, by Diane Duane. So I'm kind of excited to read this. Okay, now other potential reads are this trilogy, the Legacies trilogy. This trilogy excites me because there's some secret that's being passed down from captain to captain of the Enterprises, and I want to know what the secret is. So the first book is called Captain to Captain. These are all by Greg Cox, by the way. Captain to Captain. And then Best Defense. Also really like the covers of these. And then A Purgatory's Key. So those seem like they're going to be good to read. And then Steve Donahue has talked about this book, The Captain's Table, multiple times on his channel over the last few years. I've been watching since 2019. I've probably seen this mentioned 3 times at least. And I've always wanted to read it. And over the last year, I finally broke down and found a copy of this in really good shape. So I'm super thrilled and I would like to read this. I don't know for sure that I will, but I really want to. So I pulled it for my potentials pile. And then I would also like to read the novelization of The Wrath of Khan, just because that is like the best original series movie. So I would really like to read the novelization of it. It's really not that long. And then I would really like to read, and I probably will read this one for sure, because it's too irresistible to me. The First Adventure by Vonda N. McIntyre. And this is about the very first time the original Star Trek crew had a mission together. So this is supposedly the very first mission. So yes, I'm really interested in reading this one. And then Final Frontier by Diane Carey. And this one is all about Captain Kirk's father, George. So this is pretty much irresistible to me. This is going to be a for sure read. Then I have two really early collections of short stories called Star Trek The New Voyages. I have books 1 and books 2. Those interest me a great deal. I'm highly likely to read those as well. Then I have this book called The Best of Trek from the Magazine for Star Trek Fans. So this is just a lot of articles, interviews, a whole hodgepodge of things that apparently had originally appeared in this Star Trek fan magazine. I thought this would be a really interesting read, so this is another one that I would potentially be reading in the next 3 months. And then I have a few novels whose covers feature Uhura. And since Nichelle Nichols passed away, I thought this would be a good time to read the books I have with her on the cover. That's not one of them. The first one is The 3-Minute Universe by Barbara Paul. The next one is Uhura's Song by Janet Kagan. And the next one is The Tears of the Singers by Melinda Snodgrass. I really like the cover of this one. And then I really wanted to read this one, Time for Yesterday by A.C. Crispin, and realized I did not have the first one, which is Yesterday's Sun. So I will not be reading this one, sadly. Then, and this one I'm pretty likely to read actually, it's called Bloodthirst by J.M. Dillard. Sounds like it has something to do with a vampire. And since I'm just coming off of Vampiril and Maypire, which was my 2-month-long vampire reading purge, I thought this would be a really fun transition into BookTrek. And then somebody in the live on Friday, Sean and I did a live, a Maypire live. Somebody talked about reading, that they were going to be participating in BookTrek and they were going to be reading these books. So, and I have them. So I thought, you know what, if somebody else is going to be reading them, I'll go ahead and read these myself. The first one is Dreadnought by Diane Carey. And then its sequel, Battle Stations, also by Diane Carey. And then this one really looked interesting to me. It's called Legacy, and it's by Michael Jan Friedman. And Michael Jan Friedman is an Star Trek author I trust, so I might be reading this one. Then I have The Kobayashi Maru by Julia Eckler, just because, you know, The Kobayashi Maru, that's kind of an irresistible title, so, you know. And this one I've pulled just because, Picard, just because Kirk is wearing a bow tie. And I have to know why he's wearing a bow tie. And it's called How Much for Just the Planet. So that one looks like it's going to be fun. And the title sounds fun as well. And then finally, I pulled the Eidic Epidemic, which I actually read about 10 pages into last year and put it aside in favor of a different book. But I kind of would like to go back and read this one. So I have it in the pile. Oh, and then I forgot to mention this one. The Memory Prime by Gar and Judith Reeves Stevens. So this one I started, I don't know, 5 months ago or something, but I only got around 20 pages in, and then I set it aside and I didn't go back and pick it up and finish it. But I did like what I'd read up to that point, so I do want to go ahead and finish this one. Okay, and then for the first away mission, the Read a Nonfiction Science Book, I have 3 possibilities. The first book, I could not find it. I don't know where it's at. I just looked everywhere for it. It's got to be here somewhere. My books are kind of a mess at the moment, but it has something to do with black holes. It just came out sometime in the last year, but it looks really good. The other one is The Biggest Ideas in the Universe, Space, Time, and Motion by Sean Carroll. And the third possibility is When the Earth Had Two Moons, Cannibal Planets, Icy Giants, Dirty Comets, Dreadful Orbits, and the Origins of the Night Sky by Eric Aspaugh, I think is how you pronounce it. So one of those 3 will do for that away mission. And then I have a little pile of books for the other away mission where you just read something that has to do with Star Trek. So the first one is Star Trek Lives, Personal Notes and Anecdotes, which essentially is a book that came out so many years after Star Trek. The book is old now, but it talks about what the actors are doing today and things like that. So I thought that sounded really interesting. So that's a possibility. Then I have this children's book called What is the Story of Captain Kirk by M.D. Payne, which looks adorable. I probably will read that one just because it's so short. Then I have this book called Willful Child, The Search for Spark by Steve Erickson, which is a humorous take on the Star Trek theme. I'll just read you this little top paragraph so you can get the idea. These are the voyages, such as they are, of the Engage-class starship Willful Child. Its rambunctious mission to seek out new worlds on which to plant the Terran flag, to subjugate and occasionally obliterate strange and disgusting life forms, and to boldly go, well, you get the idea. So that sounds like it's going to be fun. And then, of course, Night of the Living Trekkies by Kevin David Anderson and Sam Stahl. There are a few other booktubers reading this, I know, and it sounds like a good time. It's about a zombie outbreak at a Star Trek convention. Then I have To the Stars, the autobiography of George Takei. And Star Trek Memories, William Shatner with Chris Kresge. Okay, after I finished recording my video, I got up and made a more thorough search through my unshelved books for that book about black holes and found it. A Brief History of Black Holes. A Brief History of Black Holes and Why Nearly Everything You Know About Them Is Wrong. And it is by Dr. Becky Smethurst. She is actually a booktuber as well, so I did take the liberty of pre-ordering her book when it was available. And then, while I was looking for that book, I came across two more Star Trek books that were not with any of my other Star Trek books. And the first one here is The 50-Year Mission, The First 25 Years, Edward Gross and Mark A. Altman, with a foreword by Seth MacFarlane. I'm a huge Seth MacFarlane fan. Love Seth MacFarlane, who is also a huge Star Trek geek. But anyways, this is the complete, uncensored, and unauthorized oral history of Star Trek. So this is a big book. This one sounds like it's going to be really good. And then I also found Still Just a Geek, an annotated memoir by Will Wheaton. I didn't know he made a follow-up book. So I think that wraps up all of my Star Trek possibilities. We'll see how the next 3 months go and which of these I actually get read.